to have a bit chat about Emily and her goal last game and how important she is to the side.
Well, Evie is, first of all, it's impressive that she comes in and perform that way, because she's been not training at club for a long time after the Olympics. I know she's been training and training hard, but it's a different thing to train individually than training with club. So that's one of the reasons why she started on the bench. She got a good training week with us, but then coming in that second half and not just getting that goal, but that assist as well. It's interesting as well now when we changed to 4-3-3 and put her a little bit higher up the park as that 8/10, so she can kind of float in that area in between the opponent's midfield and back line, and then have those late runs into the box that we've seen her score from before. And I guess it's a good habit of hers to score late goals in that goal at that stadium, thinking about the goal against China as well.
Thank you. Are you expecting her to perform similar this week or this next game?
Yeah, of course. And without jumping ahead here, because I haven't given the team a lineup as well, but obviously that second half, she took a step in the right direction.
Inevitably, when new faces come into the squad, other faces have to make way. And with a home World Cup on the horizon, that is inevitably going to sting a bit more than it normally would. How are you approaching that, trying to bring in new talent, knowing that that might mean other faces have to make way?
This is actually one of the most important questions from a leadership perspective, to find this balance that you're talking about. Because on the one hand, as a national team, you have very limited time together, both training, but mostly so games. So if you look from now to the World Cup and you look at how many camps we have and how many games we have, it's very, very limited actually. Even though the time sounds like it's far away, but it's gonna come like that. So it's that balance of one, preparing the team to be able to perform in terms of having maybe a cohesion with a small group of players that know how to play with each other, and you get a natural team where you can quickly get up to speed and understand that, hey, Anne wants to pass to the right foot, but I want it to the left foot, and you have that understanding and chemistry and cohesion in the team. And in order to do that, they need to play a lot of minutes together. But on the other hand, we also know from that gap report that we need depth. And in order to win something in a tournament, you need to be able to, one, rotate throughout a tournament, but also two, you need to have coverage if you get injuries and suspensions. So you also need to make sure, we need to make sure that we bridge that gap. And we, as you've seen this year, we've tried to balance it in a way where we could perform in the Olympics, but at the same time bring a lot of new players in, either by exposing them to this training environment or also get them on the park. I also think I have to say I'm really, really appreciative of the leadership group in here as well, and their understanding where this team is and where it needs to be, because it has to be a part that you ask there, an acceptance from some of these established core players that maybe know that I deserve to get more minutes here, but also have them to buy in to understand, hey, you know what, we need these players with us to 23, so let's bring them on even if it costs me some minutes in this game, because we need to do this together.
Thanks, Joey. Jalissa Apps.
Hi, Brady. I just wondered about the crowd in the last game. Were you shocked at how much support Brazil had, and what did you make of the crowd in Australia?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was extremely impressed about the atmosphere in the stadium, or even outside the stadium when the bus was driving in. We felt it. We felt the vibe, and actually some of the girls said today, we were speaking this morning, they said it felt like a tournament game, like that real tournament mode, and that's a teaser and a taste of what's coming in World Cup 23, and I think everyone in that stadium helped creating that atmosphere of a real proper amazing football game. So for me it was amazing, and honestly I love that type of environment, and I can see that the player did it as well, that they thrive under that environment and played good football.
Thanks,
and just a quick follow-up, if I could, just on Martha, do you expect her to play a bit more in the second game than she did in the first game, considering sort of how the impact she had when she came on?
For sure. I think most likely what they've done is it was a lot of travel, jet lag and such, and they probably eased both her and Dabinia into training to protect them a little bit. And also I know they're in a phase where they're experimenting a little bit and rebuilding with young players. So I would be surprised if not Marta and Dabinia both start in this next game. And honestly, I hope they do, because in these games you want to play the best teams possible, the best players possible, to make sure you get exposed to quality players.
Thanks so much, Jalissa. Tracy Holmes.
Hi, Tony. Couple of quick questions. The first one is, with such a physical encounter on Saturday night, how have the team pulled up in that regard? And then secondly, kind of a broader discussion about Australia and hosting international sport with its COVID restrictions at the moment. And I know that athletes are being able to sort of travel and play internationally a lot easier than they come here, where vaccination is required. And I just wondered if you had any view on what it's like travelling and playing overseas compared to the strict restrictions put in place here.
First question is, I'm glad the game was physical, because I was a bit disappointed about our attitude and physical presence against Ireland, where I felt they wanted it more than us. I think in the Brazil game we showed up and showed what we're about. But I also think every game always between Australia and Brazil has been a physical encounter, and I think it's going to be that tomorrow as well. The M team here, together with the players, have done a phenomenal job in terms of recovery strategies. So after training today, I'm going to know how many I have available, but it looks promising as of now in terms of having everyone available for selection. In terms of the second question, actually a lot of the first camps that we had in Europe, we operated under very, very strict COVID protocol in those camps. So we kind of got used to and learned how to deal with those circumstances and run a camp with that. And also in the Olympic, it was very, very strict in terms of the protocols, what we could do and not do in terms of staying at the hotel and just go on a bus to a training facility and such. So I credit this team and this environment and all the people that I had around me that helps me to make sure all this standard is in place, because there's a lot of things to think about, and there's a lot of things behind the scenes that I don't even see, a lot of moving pieces that my staff is doing a phenomenal job to make this as smooth as possible for the players in order for them to perform.
Thanks, Tracy. Sam Pote.
Sorry, another question. Just about Claire Wheeler. How do you think she went last game, and what do you want to see from her next game?
A bit short time for her and a little bit of different game time when she came on. The reason why she came on is because she's been training very good, both in the Ireland camp and now. So I got her on the park in the Ireland game. I got her on the park this last game as well. And I've obviously watched her in Fortuna Hjørring where she's playing, and she's taking step every week in terms of developing, especially when it comes to the tempo and the intensity. I think everyone that's seen her play know that she's a very, very smart player. She's a very technical player. She reads the game very well. She covers ground defensively very well as well. Her job is to bring it up to that international level when it comes to tempo and intensity, and the more she's exposed to our environment, the better she can do that.
Thanks, Sam. George Clark.
Hey Tony, you obviously mentioned how some of the girls might pull up physically. As a consequence of that, how much rotation are we likely to see, or are you going to look for more continuity for the first, half or so?
Not to reveal too much. We'll take a look at the training today, and then we always have a meeting the night before the game together with our M team, our sports science and sport medicine team, and we'll look at every player, and we'll look at risk versus reward. We'll look at the amount of minutes they can play. As you know, some of these players are coming back from injuries in clubland, so we want to pay respect to the players' long-term development here as well. So you're probably going to see a game tomorrow where it's a balance of some consistency and cohesion, keep working on that, but also making sure that we vet some players. What I do want to take the opportunity to say now, though, is I did put the last game in a little bit of perspective already in the post-game press conference, where Brazil rotated a lot of players in that first game. They're rebuilding. Were there some good things in our performance? Yes, but I also think there were some areas when we were vulnerable. We got dispossessed in some bad areas, and their transition game could really hurt us. We could have cuffed a couple of goals there. We looked into that. I want to see a team now that steps on the park and show that we can deliver a performance back to back. and play with the same intensity, with the same energy, with the same commitment and mindset. Don't shy away in those one-on-one duels like you saw a physical game. Like it's also a game where I want to not just say, hey, we got that win, easing out, some complacency, a little bit of rotation, look at play, and all of a sudden the game becomes something different. This is an important game to keep rebuilding, and I want to see that mindset tomorrow. It's really important.
Samantha Lewis.
Thanks, Anne. Tony, you mentioned vulnerabilities and wanting to build upon the first game. Are there any things in particular in terms of tactics that you're perhaps wanting to improve upon instead of just the sort of individual one-on-one tempo and energy from the players?
Two things I can share without giving too much to Brazil here. One is the final third. If you look at the passing stats and all those things, the amount of times we took our attack into the final third statistically was really, really, really good in this game. And I mean really good even compared to some of the best games in the Olympics. But then once in the final third, I do think that we rushed things at times. Yes, we do have a world-class forward in Kurt, and we want to kind of feed our balls into the goal zone as soon as possible at times. But there are moments where we need to pick and choose when we're going to play that final pass so that we can be a little bit more confident and establish a little bit more of a momentum and get more numbers into that goal zone in the final third. So that's one of the things that I want to see improvement in this game. And then the second one is the defensive transition, meaning when we get dispossessed, how do we react to that moment? Because Brazil is going to target our centre backs and try to get in behind like they did in this game, and we need to have good positioning when we get dispossessed, but also our initial reaction so that we can stop that transition before it even happens. And if it happens, how can we deal with those balls in behind? Because they got some real good pace and real good delivery to get in behind. We saw that a couple of times when they get one with Lydia there, and we obviously want to avoid that as much as possible. So I think that's two of the areas that I want to see specifically in this game coming up.
We've got time for 3 more questions. If you want to raise your hand, Joey Lynch.
Tony, with the obvious disclaimer that sometimes they're not worth the paper they're printed on, but can I ask, what are your future plans for the months ahead? Because we've seen that there's a game against the United States been mooted for Sydney. That's not been announced yet, but are you planning on staying in Australia to watch the A-League women's competition when that kicks off? What are your plans for the months ahead?
Well, my plans has been from day one, as soon as I can get into Australia and as soon as these quarantine rules easen up and I can get some exposure to local football, I want to be here watching football. I want to meet the club coaches, I want to meet the players, but also I want to meet all the Football Australia staff. I haven't even been in the office yet. I want to meet you guys personally. I want to meet all the stakeholders, the sponsors, not to talk about all the fans. So I actually can't wait to come here and stay here. What my schedule look like right now is that post this camp, I'll go scout some key club games in Europe and some Champions League games, and prepping for that camp coming up in November in Australia. And post that Australia camp in November, I'll stay here to make sure I can meet as many people as possible in such a short time as possible. Because at that time, hopefully the A-League will be up and running as well, so all the clubs has their trainings and games.
Thanks. No hands are up. Any final questions before we close out?
I'd like to just touch on something you spoke on before regarding the amount of debutantes that you're giving opportunities to and the issues of depth. In particular, what are the key areas that you feel that you need to see a greater depth of talent and players gaining more experience ahead of the 2023 World Cup?
I've been honest on that since day one. Even when I announced the Olympic roster, I said I unfortunately had to leave some really good attacking players outside of that roster that I think deserve to be in that Olympic roster. We have tons, and I mean tons of quality in attacking midfield and forward positions. But we have, throughout the years, even before I arrived, and you look at the gap report, we lack some depth in the defensive positions, defensive midfield and backline positions. So those are the ones, if you even look at caps, and if you look at players that might not be in the starting lineup, and you look at the bench and the game changer, and you look at the amount of caps, and you compare our defenders with our attacking midfielders and attackers, you see tons of caps and a lot of experience in some of those attacking plays, but you see less experience, so to speak, on the defending side. So that's definitely one of the sides where we need to get more depth. And you saw I think there was some report there after 19 when you had Laura Brock injured before the tournament, you had Polks injured during the tournament, and it was a lot of moving pieces when players has to move from midfield and outside back and so forth. And maybe instead of one player out, one player in, that lack of depth could sometimes hurt in tournaments. So we definitely need to look into that from now to the World Cup 23.
Final question.
Just if I can just ask one more, if it's okay. How much rotation will you have in the back line, given that Australia historically has really relied on only a few defensive players, there hasn't been much depth. Will you make significant changes in the back line to test out players on Tuesday night?
Yeah, if you look at the games from when I started in April up until now, it has been a lot of backline play that's got exposure, both in a back four and a back three. If you look at all those friendlies, it's very, very few games that I started with the same backline from one game to another. Very few times, if any. I don't have the stats here, sorry about that. So again, I'm coming back to that balance that I said in the beginning, the balance between consistency and get a chance to play, get playing time together versus getting some new players in. And the one thing that I also want to mention here, just from a national team coach perspective, is there's not every camp that you have access to all the players either. If you remember that April camp, I didn't even have Steph and Ellie in that camp for different reasons. And then in this last camp in Ireland, I didn't have Ellie available. So it's also making sure that the times in camp when I do have some players available, you also need to take advantage of that time. So it's that balance of when you keep time to those core players because you have availability, both physically and they're here and available, but also to give playing time to the players that needs to get exposed to this. So I'm very well aware of the situation, and these are discussions that me and my staff has every day in camp. You know, do we do this, do we do that, do we start her, do we do a first half and then sub in a halftime, depending on what the game looked like. Because at the end of the day, we want to win the game as well, but not on the expense on the long-term development journey for this team. So these are great questions, and maybe sorry for all the long answers, but these are the things I'm working on a daily basis in camp. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong.